Joining us on the line right now is Aron, resident scholar and director of Russian Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, the AEI. Leon, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, a good day to have you, because it seems that Vladimir Putin, though his country is in shambles, it seems that we as Americans have now turned to Vladimir Putin as our guide on all things having to do with difficult foreign policy questions. This as he takes to the op-ed pages of the New York Times to offer us a nice little lecture. Your thoughts on the developments of the last few days with regard to Vladimir Putin?
Well, it is rather strange. We reached a point. We had prior to that, we had reached a point where, of course, he ignored the request to extradite Snowden, the NSA leaker. He publicly called our Secretary of State a liar. I mean, literally.
Yes.
There was no ambiguity there.
With regard to the use of chemical weapons in Syria.
No, actually, he ascribed to Kerry concealing the fact that Al-Qaeda is in Syria, whereas in his press conference, Kerry said exactly the opposite.
I see.
In other words, Putin invented this, but he invented it in order to call our Secretary of State a liar. Literally, and from various Russian words for lying, he chose one of the rudest ones. And in essence, he also called the president a liar because he gave an interview last week. I'm talking about Putin, where he said, "Well, the president said that Obama said that there are chemical weapons in Syria." Well, first of all, it has not been proven, and if chemical weapons were used, how do we know they were not used by the rebels? In other words, all of that, right? So the next thing we know, Putin establishes himself as a molder of American foreign policy on a very important issue. I think it happened because, the Russians play chess, and unlike us, they look at the whole board. And when the president of the United States tailored our relationship to the Syrian conflict very narrowly to the chemical weapons, as if, killing 100,000 people with bullets and knives is less reprehensible than killing them with chemical weapons. He already provided an opening for Putin. And then Secretary of State, which some people say was a gaffe, proposed in Britain a couple of days ago that the way to end this conflict is for Syria to surrender its chemical weapons.
Was that a gaffe? Was that just a gaffe that turned into something?
Well, they seem to be claiming credit now.
I talked to some people at the State Department, and the opinions differ. In any case, if you say something like this, clearly you're providing a huge opening for the Russians who are actually acting on Syria's behalf.
Yeah.
And this is very important. There were several tactical goals here for Putin to pursue, right? One of them is to show himself that, he could stand up to the U.S., that he could, not be cajoled or threatened, and in the end sway the U.S. to his line. This is very important for him domestically, where his popularity is sagging. But most importantly, one of the things that Putin has always been scared of is a regime change. Mm-hmm. Regime change anywhere, but particularly on the territory of the former Soviet Union and in the friendly to Russia authoritarian states. And so the key to Putin was always not to allow the change of regime in Syria. And now he has achieved that goal.
Aron is our guest. He is the director of Russian Studies over at the American Enterprise Institute. And let me ask you just a basic question here, because the whole idea is that Russia is now our partner in trying to bring peace to the Middle East, specifically in Syria, but hopefully perhaps in Iran and other places. Can I ask you a basic question? Is it in Vladimir Putin's interest to have peace in the Middle East? At least the way we would understand there would be peace.
There is peace. I mean, there's peace and there's peace. There's a piece of a graveyard. Remember, the Soviet Union was always for peace.
Very peaceful under Stalin.
Well, this was the key propaganda slogan. We are for peace. Well, we are for peace in the sense that everything remains as it was before. So you're right. I mean, Putin, having presumably, right, solved the Syrian crisis, which of course he did not solve. He just postponed indefinitely any U.S. action on behalf of the opposition to the murderous regime. But in Iran, you mentioned Iran. Well, Russia is continuing to say that, no, Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. This is all a fantasy. We voted with you once in the UN for sanctions, but there's no point in doing it anymore. Iran is not developing anything. So, yeah, I mean, this is peace. This is stability. If you want to go down that road. Remember, like I said before, for Putin, and of course this is sort of the Russian neighborhood, it's not too far. For Putin, the most important thing is not to allow people to overturn an authoritarian regime anywhere close to Russia, because then the Russian people want there, and they're wondering why is it that we having this and other countries tend to have better political arrangements. That's been his nightmare.
I see that there's some news this morning that the Russians are sending an anti-ship into the eastern Mediterranean, where we have a lot of resources right now. It's the Syrians don't have a navy. What is this all about?
Well, like I said, think of it as a chess game. We've given them a huge opening. You could drag 3 rooks through that opening. There is Russia's prestige in the Middle East, which was non-existent, is suddenly up where it was before 1973, when President Sadat of Egypt expelled the Russian Soviet advisors. Russia is now emerging as a country in the Middle East. It's a power broker. It prevented the U.S. military action, and it stands by its allies. So all of these things allow Russia to expand its influence in the Middle East. And remember, I'm not suggesting that it's a totally zero-sum game, but Putin's goals are totally different from ours.
Leon Aron, really quickly, we had Senator Rand Paul on yesterday. I asked him if he were president, how would he influence Russia? All he could come up with is using our trading power, economic power. Is that all we've got at this point?
We don't have much with the oil at $110 a barrel and Russia pumping 10 million barrels a day. We don't have a hell of a lot of sway over that.
All right,
Leon Aron, thanks for that. As depressing as it is, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Aron.